Right. Microphones on.
All right.
Okay, good evening. I'm calling to order the Independent Ethics Review Task Force on Wednesday, May 22nd at 6 p.m. Do we have anybody signed up for public comment? No one signed up. No public comment. Great, let's move forward. It's the review of and consideration of an action on the minutes of April 29th meeting. If everybody had a chance to review, are there any changes, questions,
No changes, no.
modifications? Can I get a motion to approve?
And make a motion, we only Excel to approve.
Second, all in favor of approving minutes? Aye. And it's approved. Right, the next item on the agenda is our workshops, review of and discussion on the proposed revisions to the Code of Ethical Conduct. Today, we are taking sections 285 and 286 at hand. I flip to that in the KP code. And let's just hit this in order. 285 is the restrictions applicable to former officials. Former member of city council must not use or disclose confidential government information acquired during the member's service on the council, and then it sets forth some exceptions if the item's no longer confidential, if it's necessary to further public safety, or if it's reporting of illegal and unethical conduct. And then the second section is about the financial interest and the relationship with the city post service. Has anybody had any chance to review some of the complementary with ethics in that section? Have any opening comments around it? But one of the things that led to the selection of this particular item, if I recall correctly, was the hot button topic of 13 months.
Yeah.
Where we stated that, or the code currently states that no former member of city council may have a financial interest in a significant contract with the city within the meaning of section 2-80 within 13 months following the expiration of the former member's most recent term of office. And so some of the varying codes have 1 year, some have 2 years. I believe League City did have our 13-month comparable. So there was one that did in fact have the same exact time. What are our thoughts on the, I'm going to call the cooling off time period?
Seems like most have 2 years, though, huh? I think there was
Yeah.
one that was equivalent to us.
I think City of Houston was the one with the singular year.
And what was the 13 months again?
League City.
No, I mean, for even for Sugarland too.
So yes, our current code says 13 months.
I know, I mean, 13 months, where did that come from? No, it's,
So we wanted it longer initially. And got pushed back. I think we originally wanted 24 months. And it's, we couldn't get that.
it's just kind of weird, like Sugarland has it and, like you say, the whatever cities, like, is that somewhere like a history of there or?
Within 1 year. City council wanted less than 1 year,
Okay.
so we kind of said
13 months.
about that. To that point, when we do present this, again, we just keep reminding folks on the dais that this covers us, planning and zoning, parks. This is not a document directed exclusively at them. But it was, because that's as much as we could get away with it.
Remind me, Andrew, maybe Steve, where was the other provision? I'm trying to pull it. That was within our code that we talked about, the 24 months. prior meeting. It was in a similar 283.
Disclosure of official information.
281B. Thank you. So, 281B says, for a period of 2 years after termination of his or her city service, an official must not, on behalf of any other person, for compensation directly, indirectly, formally, or informally act as agent, attorney, law, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now I've lost the 2 year.
Was this for a period of 2 years after the termination?
Thank you. It's at the beginning.
Yes.
There we go. So we had this discussion last meeting around consistency and utilizing some sort of a consistent time frame. So that was part of the discussion, and I think, you know, taking this together. I think
Wasn't council opposed to anything more than that? Actually, we're opposed to 13 months, or do I recall that correct?
I don't remember what they were exactly what they were pushing for, but
It seems like the norm is 2 years, seems like
yeah.
anything over that, maybe a hindrance to hiring people, I guess, is what the you know, what your model code was saying, in the model code. But it seems like 2 years is the norm. Most people are doing,
Yeah. And 281 was more focused on work-related timeout versus information.
But I do agree, like 13 months is so odd, like who's gonna remember that, you know, it's either 1 year or 2 years, you know, it's just. Like they could really truly forget 13 months, you know, because it's such an odd number.
is it on the mark?
Which the one question I had, and what Andrew was talking about in terms of it being more than just city council. The way I read it, this is just for city council, whereas the other items are, it says for an official,
Right.
and so 285 just says city council.
So, or,
I'm not arguing for it, yes, I'm just saying it's different than the other items.
different pop. There's overlap, but it's not necessarily the same parties. Impacted, right? Is that what you're?
So 285 specifically says former member of city council.
Yes,
As opposed to say.
As opposed to
Elected representative, right?
the other items say an official, which is more inclusive, if you will. That matters or not, but
I think it does. Good catch. Two eight one should probably say city council.
should it be the other way?
I was thinking the other thing.
Yeah,
Do we?
I know we're talking about the number, and that's a different question, but it's.
same context, but is it? Am I misinterpreting this? Is it possibly in conflict with itself? Are we, we're talking about a city council person. 285, but 281 says like a city official.
Right, so 285 is to try to keep city council from taking anything in an executive session like an economic development. And the oversight here is that 4B also has that information, and 4B is not straight council, so that should be expanded. But there's some understanding that they have the most confidential stuff, and so they don't want them to take that confidential stuff and then go share it with somebody else or use it for their future employment. The purpose of 281 was so that not only can city council not take a job and go out there every single board, but she could have a planning and zoning commissioner who was a developer. You don't want them to go back in front of the same board for a period of time because there's some loyalty perceived to be there, some favoritism. And so 281 was supposed to be broad enough to apply to the other boards. Or to apply to your own board. So once you all term off, you can't come back and defend somebody who's been accused of violating the code for a period of 13 months or 2 years, I'm sorry.
So. Our board does get confidential information, deliberating, stuff like that. Does planning and zoning, or do the other ones ever get stuff that?
Planning and zoning gets legal advice, like rule about, and different advice of that nature. Parks Animal Advisory, I cannot imagine unless they're being part of it, brought in part of a lawsuit, that they would ever have a need to have confidential information. ZBA, we have a few times based on some district court appeals. There is the potential, but most of the confidential information is either going to be related to a lawsuit, which is something we're doing right now, and in a year or two, hopefully is solved based on what's in front of P&Z or CBA, or it's going to be economic development, which is a long-term 4A, 4B in city council, where you're doing an incentive agreement, or you're trying to get a business to come here and talk about, you know, the value of the proprietary interest, the number of employees, the salaries, and how much your property is going for, and you know, how much help do we really need to be able to get here, and what is the value you're going to put back, so that when we do the little math, that at the end, we've actually made money, rather than, even though we've rebated your taxes back, we've had enough employees that you've paid them a high enough salary that they're going to certain restaurants to eat. You've met the number of hotel nights that we require in the contract. I mean, we require some people have 10 hotel nights a year, 20 hotel nights a year, depending on how big your rebate is. And that you have to have a certain amount of property there. And so not all of your stuff is rebated back, only portions of it. So we try to, but it's a fine math game, and then we're sitting there, they give us the information, and the council gets in there, talks to our economic development people, and they say, well, now that we have this information, and the cost of the land is this, and we can structure it this way, that sort of thing takes more than a year on some things like the Lake Point and Imperial. Those have been multi-year discussions, and you certainly wouldn't want that information to be shared. But the short answer is yes.
Okay, I mean, I just want to make sure.
There are some other-
I want to make sure that as many groups who may have confidential information are covered by it. That not just city council, if we have information we shouldn't disclose, or P&Z.
So the reason you're asking or stating it is,
I just want to make sure
are you suggesting, similar to Doug, that we expand from city council member to city official
Or just to keep it consistent.
assistant?
Yeah. And we consider it the city official.
That's what I was gonna ask. That would include commission,
So,
yeah. And does that really apply as much? Like, was it intentional to just be directed towards city council members?
we consider city officials. Okay.
You're in the definition, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So should we define official or no?
I think, isn't it already defined?
You do define as anybody elected or appointed with an advisory or a position.
Official means a member of city council, administrative board, or advisory board.
Okay,
I mean, everybody.
So then 285,
Charge board, therefore by state law.
Yes.
okay.
so then 285 should say former city official.
Everybody opposed to broad.
I questioned the intent, like, why was it only city official or city council as it stands now versus broader language previously?
Or is there? to piggyback on your question. Does this create any kind of a unknown problem to broaden it to city official? I think it's a question for like Meredith and Anjali.
It could be.
It's so inclusive, I mean, people.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question.
It makes it easier to apply too, like to apply the code to various individuals and situations.
And it could have been that 281, we were just thinking dollar connection versus an information, source of information.
Two 281 is premised on the fact that there's some favoritism of you going in front of your previous board for a certain period of time. So the P and Z example would be a developer getting in front of them, wanting his zoning change to have them approve a final development plan or some zoning change based on their previous relationship of him sitting up on the board. 281 had nothing to do with confidential. It's just making sure there is no perception of impropriety based on that relationship. On 285, it was just thinking who has the confidential information. And it was a negotiation with city council when we adopted this. The reason that B is there as far as significant interest in a contract, it's because city council and members are the ones that are adopting contracts. Parks, planning and zoning, ZBA, they don't enter into contracts. They don't approve contracts, so there's no opportunity there to award yourself a contract. Purchasing typically disqualifies them, but it's not an ethical violation.
So then you have to go back to 280 and revise. Wherever this utility is referenced. In paragraph 3. And I'm wondering, like Meredith, like you said, they're involved in more juicier stuff, more. So.
Where a real conflict can truly exist. I just question for those outside of city council. Is how applicable this should be.
I'm not sure I understand your question. 280 is while they're in office. And 285B is after they leave office. I'm not sure.
So
I'm even on the same page.
Officials prohibited from doing business with the city?
City council.
So if P and Z left school as a board. I mean, how would there be a conflict of interest if they were hired by a developer or, I mean, would that be allowed or I mean, how would that play out?
That would be allowed, but it would be a problem under the way the ethics code is written for them to come in front of the P and Z board for 13 months and represent that client.
Right, okay.
Because there is a perception or the possibility of a perception that they're gonna get the votes because of sitting in that chair for the last year. But they can work for that company and that, as long as they're not the one standing at the podium,
Right.
the code does not prohibit that.
Okay.
We've had that same situation with law firms. We've just had where we go, oh, take their name off the application, put a different lawyer on there, send another one to the meeting. That one can't be on there. That person served on P and Z.
So outside of P and Z, which other board would be in that type of position? Which type of board or which type of other committee that the city creates?
We have ZBA and BSC, which are final decision-making boards. But typically, the individuals aren't represented. Because ZBA you have like setback variations. You would have building a patio cover, which I think we've changed some of it, so you don't have to do that. And that sort of thing, but the people sitting on ZBA are not necessarily the experts in that field. Where they would go out there and then be the builder or the handyman or somebody who's doing that. The likelihood of either of those boards being a conflict, I don't really see that based on the nature of those boards and the members that are on there. Animal advisory is just an advisory board that they just make recommendations.
So we may be going down the road that we don't have to go down to. We may not need to
I'm sure
change.
to think that.
It will be 4A, 4B. City Council P and Z where I could see the biggest conflicts based on the people that are selected to be on those boards. Because of the knowledge they have and how frequently they meet.
So with that wording, how we cover that then in here? Because it really just doesn't apply to council members. It could apply to P and Z, but it doesn't apply to other task force or other committees. Remembering any gray areas. Well, you put officially, like you're saying, it's maybe too broad.
But I would say if you broaden it from. If it doesn't apply to a group, nothing over,
Eliminates any gray area.
yeah.
You're saying if it doesn't apply, it just won't even be a situation to begin.
It's meat,
Yeah.
basically. But. If there's 6 boards and it applies to 2 or 3 of them. And not to the other 3. I think it's okay. My position would be that it's okay to broaden it, kind of generically.
I think there's a distinction between whether or not it applies and the probability of it occurring. It applies to everybody, but the probability of it occurring in front of a number of boards, there is a distinction. Being a lawyer, I live and die by distinctions.
Just hypothetically, animal advisory board, just an advisory board, if we have I don't know the purview of said board, but you could have a vet serving on the animal advisory board that could have impact of board related activity.
Yes, that we are required by law to have a veterinary on there. The difference between the animal advisory board, to get off topic, is kind of an interesting board because it's made up of volunteers, shelter employee, a veterinarian. And as they term off, other volunteers join on, but they're still sitting in the audience, and sometimes it's difficult to remember who the current volunteers sitting on the board are, because it is the same group that rotates through year after year after year. But they all have the best interest of the animals. And so they don't really see that being a conflict. They're not representing somebody other than the animals.
Right. I'm teetering in the middle of this one.
Is there a downside to broadening it? If it covers animal services. And there's nothing that they could really do that would violate it. I don't have a problem with it being there versus. Not having everybody covered.
The question is, do you want to have it covered for an anomaly or not? Like. I'm a good example. I'm on the ethics review board. That's what I do for a living, do compliance to ethics work. So, I mean, theoretically, this board would not fall into this bucket, but I could try to solicit a contract with the city. I won't, but I mean, do you find that to be a conflict?
You could actually be hired to come in front of this board in your professional capacity to represent somebody who has had a complaint filed against them.
Mhm.
So it would apply.
Yes.
I would definitely leave it in.
Thanks.
I don't want to go up against you.
Consensus?
That was council member and decision-making board members. I mean, I'm just throwing out something. I mean, it's to cover. Not maybe to be so broad as. What Doug
There was
suggested.
terminology you've used before, where it's a specific board type where, oh, I can't recall. Help me.
Sure.
It is,
You have advisory.
where like versus like an advisory versus like a decision-making board.
Was that?
What's the term?
Quasi judicial.
But P and Z is not quasi judicial,
ZBA and BSC are only
So-
quasi issues.
It would cover.
so it would cover. Trying to bucket, sure.
Sure.
And is the line maybe financial, so. someone with an animal. If their board has no say, no control over purchasing contracts, anything like that. Then we can, well, we do, because we can fine people, which is money.
That's not tax dollars. That's the person's personal dollars.
Eliminate grower, it's gotta be.
What would the downside be, right, like would it create a barrier for those who wanted to volunteer, but then do we want somebody volunteering to try to receive a benefit, you know? So I'm looking for the downside, like if we just broaden it to consistent city official, the language that's used throughout, where would we be potentially creating an issue that's not currently in existence? I just don't see it.
I don't see it either.
I think it could be debated and it may not be well received, I don't know, but I think from a consistency standpoint, I think it makes sense. It could prevent a future issue that has not arisen yet. And it could make our decision making easier later on. So if somebody filed a complaint, well, technically they're not a city council member, and then it goes up because there's possible gray area within the code.
And you're only targeting city councils in 285, and maybe that's why they might keep it at 13 months, because it's like. Whereas if you have everyone in there, maybe they realize, oh, we could expand it, because it's not just for us, it's for others.
True.
Yeah.
See it through different lens.
Right, yeah, it's not, you're not just making this rule for us, but it's for any
Not
official.
changing it to target a certain governance body.
Mhm.
Are we in favor for now, or we can redline, we're still gonna have to review the red lines and.
I'm not sure where they.
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me, but I think we're gonna broaden it, or we're proposing to broaden it to
285.
285 to be city official for consistency. Of application across the board.
Mhm. Yeah.
And would it go wrong? Next task force in 5 years.
It's a living document.
Yeah, that's why we do this every 5 years, is so that when we.
All the changes we know all these.
That is true too.
Now that we've said that this applies to a wider array of individuals. Where did we land on the 1 year versus 2 years?
Like in 2 years.
I like the 2 years too.
Anybody against 2 years?
No.
Okay, so those are the two on changes. I'm not saying we can't have other changes, but that's the consensus for that section of this part. Are there any other concerns regarding? Go ahead.
Just want to make sure that. By restricting that information, someone gets subpoenaed. They can violate this policy, right? And for any reason, somebody wound up in court lawsuit or anything like that, and they had to disclose. Information that 285 says you're not supposed to disclose, that. They're not going to get held in contempt of court, so like.
No, that they will come, if they get subpoenaed related to city business, they come to me and we represent them. And that would be a get out of jail free card that I would write, that pursuant to state law, you're obligated to comply with this. So then you would have a letter from somebody. But we can add language if you'd like,
I just want to make sure that we're not.
or otherwise.
Jam somebody up, that they get in a situation.
Also why we have great advisors. So
Yeah.
if somebody does get in that situation, we have somebody to contact for interpretation.
City attorney of the year.
I was going to say, I was going to say that he's a prominent figure. Any other comments, changes, 285? Thoughts? I'm just acknowledging the 1, 2, 3 areas super in alignment with all of the other
Mhm.
examples, as far as like the exemptions. Did anyone have any other concerns or adds or things that are missing? I'm gonna move on to the 286. Misuse of city property. An official must not use or permit others to use any city funds, property, or personnel for profit or personal convenience or benefit, except when available to the public generally or to a class of residents on the same terms and conditions. Opening comments or thoughts?
I mean, it's pretty clear and concise.
Yeah, it's,
So,
there's much more we can say about that.
So I have to go into something.
Waiting.
City council member Cal. To get around, to go around, get chauffeured around in a police car. But they're. Or they are official duty of that.
Yeah, I would say it's city business, so it is.
That was the only thing I could think of.
I like that. It's-
Can you clarify that for me real quick?
Some additional language or information, but I thought it was, I thought it was pretty clear and direct. The one thing that I observed, and I'm not recommending it, I'm just. Shall not utilize city resources or by omission allow city resources to be utilized for personal benefit. I don't personally think that or by omission, but I wanted to recognize it as a variation to the section. It's a different kind of consideration.
Are you referencing an example?
El Paso.
El Paso. Okay.
The city of Round Rock also had the shall intentionally or knowingly use. Intent so hard to prove, I'm not sure that provides any kind of merit, but. No proposed changes or comments? Oh, yes.
Yeah, could you clarify what you were adding to 286? The speaker sometimes doesn't pick up and I can't hear.
Repeat what you're having to do.
285, can you hear me okay? I can
Yeah,
see you.
I can hear you pretty good, some of the others not so much. So I was just needing clarification on 286, what the recommendation was. Were you changing an official to a city official?
Yes, so
Okay.
285 would be instead of, it says a former member of city council, it will be broadened to
Okay.
city official, so that would include board members as well.
Okay.
And then instead of the 13-month time frame, to be in alignment with other parts of the code and other comparable municipalities, we're looking and proposing to do 24 months, so the 2-year time period.
Okay, and then under the discussion on this next item, was there a discussion already on an official must not use? And was somebody making a recommendation different than an official?
I don't think the change was recommended there since that's
Okay.
with our other change.
Okay.
I was actually just observing, there's some other language that says, or by omission allow, property or resources to be utilized for personal benefit. And there was one other observation about intentionally knowing versus unintentionally. I don't know that those have merit as far as additions, but that is something that's not within our language currently, that's in some of the other codes.
Okay, thanks. There was a couple things I didn't hear, so I
I
appreciate that.
can see you now, so that's fantastic. And hearing. Perfect. Any other comments, questions? Okay. All right, so since we still have some time on the let's, if we go, if anyone else is opposed, let's look through the red lines, because we haven't had a chance to do that. We have a nice representation of the task force right now. And that way we can kind of review some of the proposed changes and how they look within the code itself. I don't know if there'll be a convenient way to track this, but if we have the track changes, we review it and are comfortable with the language, if we could not physically accept, we need to keep the red lines, but somehow have an indicator so that we can move past it on future reviews.
We can put a comment approved,
Yes, that would be fantastic. So that way it's done.
Put to bed.
Yes. We don't have to go back and have the same conversation. I mean, we might, but.
we'd be happy to have a comment next to once, reviewed date, okay.
And if there's not consensus and that we need further discussion, she said she can hear me, okay?
You have a red light too, so I don't.
Oh,
battery stops.
the battery, okay, thank you. It's a metaphor. Thank you. For that. Okay, so we'll go through the red lines. If there's general consensus, we will approve. If there is a lot of discussion around it, we can table it and move back to it. But I think we should move through the red lines as much as we can, and that way we have sections that are in completed draft form. Section 2-72, ethical values. We've added that officials have the responsibility to conduct themselves in a professional and ethical manner and must embrace the principles of honesty, accountability, respect, and trust. Officials cannot accept gifts, make business decisions, or use relationships with citizens, vendors, or businesses for personal gain. Thoughts around that language or comments?
The only thought I had is that we do have thresholds, right, for what is acceptable, or like for gifts, for instance, the value. So in saying this statement, does it conflict in any way with that? Or does it need to, do we need to?
I have a general question on this section too that you have prompted. So this section is entitled ethical values. Is this a section that, and it may be any section, but could somebody file a complaint of like 2-72C that's not covered anywhere else in the code? So it's not a conflict of interest, it doesn't meet the threshold, it's whatever it is, but I said that you are not conducting yourself with trust and respect. Would a complaint rise to the board for just violation of section 272? Or is this a section that just sets the standard of what we expect? Do you understand what I'm trying to?
I mean, we can always dismiss as frivolous. I think it's that second sentence that's a little bit more direct about. It goes more than just stating a value.
Yeah, I agree. Just because cannot accept gifts, but they can, small little things. And even that make business decisions, that standing out alone, like in isolation, someone could take it out of context.
Maybe change it so that the city official may only accept a gift that complies with this policy.
Or take it out completely because it's already covered.
Okay.
And that's what you guys are pretty much saying.
Just maybe take that whole second sentence out, yeah. I mean, those things are covered, those things are covered.
Value,
Yeah,
right?
they're covered elsewhere too.
I feel like it kind of muddies the purpose of the section.
I do.
And becomes more like actionable versus like setting the stage.
Mhm. I'm good with removing it.
I'm good.
Striking the second part of the sentence, keeping the first part of the sentence, but striking the second.
Yes, yeah,
So,
yeah.
When we first started this whole process years ago, it was just called the ethics code. And there's concern that what's ethical to some people is unethical to others. And so we tried to focus on a code of conduct, and that takes personal experience or other influences out. Different parts of the world, different parts of this country, slipping an envelope to a government official is considered normal business. And if somebody came from that area of the world or the country, it wouldn't be unethical for them to do that. But if we said this is our code of conduct, that's way more clear. It's not a decision of maybe not, it's absolute yes or no.
Mhm.
So I agree.
So ethical values. I like Rose as ethical and values code of conduct, ethical / code of conduct to make it clear that this is the way we want our city run, regardless of what you think or where you came from, that you may find it acceptable.
so your suggestion changing the title to ethical values, that's.
Ethical code of conduct or something like that in there.
So Division 2 starts with the code of ethical, so it is covered in the subsequent Division 2. And it's actually, that's where it gets like, into, the more precise definitions.
Are you talking about like section
Ethical behavior.
under such principles of conduct and ethical behavior, officials must 1, 2, and 3.
It's just a topic of discussion prior. That didn't make it into this version.
Ethics is kind of sort of the code of conduct, so, I mean, we might be splitting hairs.
Okay.
But Andy, you really feel that standards of your idea about passing, everybody. Do people really think that's ethical? When you think it's normal, but is it, do they consider it ethical?
One of my brothers lives in a country where it was pretty much understood. If you got pulled over by the cops, you paid your fine immediately on the spot in cash and you were left alone. And everybody does that and they don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Because it's the way it's always been done, but.
And if you and you try that, you'll be at the Gray Bar Hotel in the original. So
So the question is the standard? Yeah, what is our community standard?
good. So I hope we never need this, but. Maybe that goes into the education part.
I think it goes into like the specificity that follows, right? So I think this section, you have your general statement and your value statement is setting the tone for the document. So everything under this document exists to support these values that our city values and that our boards value and that we attest to. And so because we value this, we have the standards that follow that we're required to adhere to. So I think the purpose of this section is more tonal and how we're going to approach the rest of the standards, and all of the standards are specific to support this. So these, and the reason I think to reiterate why we're striking the second sentence is it became too specific, whereas we have the standards to clarify what the exact expectations are. So I agree with everything that you're saying, because I think everybody's individual code of ethics varies tremendously, globally, locally, everywhere. But I think this section is to set the tone, and then we get into the brass tacks. Post,
I think our definitions work.
yes. Okay. So the next, we added a definition, and it's my favorite. Is de minimis, and so we've added that this was not in the code at all. We've added it to a section, and because we referenced it, it is now here defined within the definitions themselves. So de minimis means any property or service, the value of which, after taking into account the frequency of such fringes, are provided to the official. Okay, is so small that it lacks significance or importance to make accounting for it unreasonable or administratively impracticable.
I like it.
No, thank you. I had to read it twice in my head because I was like, I'm gonna say, okay.
It's impracticable, the same thing as impractical. Just asking.
Oh, impracticable versus.
I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
Good question.
I don't know that it's correct. So I think I don't know, let's.
I'm not saying it's not, I just.
Andrew, are you Googling?
See, in my head, when I read it before I got to it, I read this as administratively burdensome. And that's where like my definition goes. So I was unexpected.
Do you want it to say burdensome? It's an easy change.
And that would be probably more straightforward.
Incapable of being performed or accomplished by the means employed or at command.
Burdensome.
I think that
Essentially, it's not the whole road.
And here it says impractical means it's not capable of being done or put into practice, while impractical means it's not wise or reasonable.
Oh. So
Those two words are.
burdensome, yeah, I'm good with that one too.
There we have it. When you read enough of these, like your brain automatically finishes the sentence sometimes. Okay, next change, gift. Gift means any item, so we changed it from financial, any item, service, favor, or benefit received or given having more than de minimis value. There's our circular criteria. And so we just added that it's not just financial, it's any item, service, or favor, because it could be something of reciprocity. Any comments? Everyone comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Next one, lines 276. We added, for the purposes of this code, the mayor and council members are deemed to have worked for every city department, board, and commission. And zero recollection as to the context of that, if I'm being honest.
Okay, so, it was quite a lengthy discussion going back to, representations
Hmm,
and appearances.
yes,
And the question of when are you with each board and how do you want that in there? And I think we moved it over there. Based on request.
okay, so that makes sense, so then it refers back to later on, when you're talking about if you can represent yourself in front of the board in which you serve. We added the statement so that to clarify that city council members are deemed to have served in all. Thank you.
Are you okay with it being here?
I'm okay with it being there. I understand now why it's here because it's an overarching statement. So then later on, if we have other subsequent sections that have similar language such as appearances, it's clarified. I don't mind it being here. Unless
Yeah.
anyone has objections. Is everyone ready to move to 278? Acceptance and disclosure of gifts. An official must not, we added, an official must not solicit or accept any gift that is offered or given with the intent to influence the judgment or discretion of such official, or that is given in consideration of the favorable exercise of the official's judgment or discretion in the past. And if I recall correctly, I believe we added this because it was in other comparable codes and it was a perceived gap within our current code. It sounds very familiar language too. I think this is like a points directly back to something that. And then we removed the clarification of types of gifts because gifts is gifts. Or gifts are gifts.
We know what you mean.
Any other changes or comments around that? And Anne, if we need a pause, if you're referencing something before we move past it, we can. Trying to make sure I'm not moving too quickly. So that was 278. We removed the rule of necessity because it was redundant to what would occur anyways. So whether or not this statement was in the code, this is what in fact would occur, and it had no bearing on the code itself. So sorry, anybody? Are we good? Okay. 281, representations. We added, however, it is acceptable for elected officials to represent constituents without compensation in matters of public advocacy, including but not limited to lawfully obtaining city services, licenses, or permits, or in transacting other routine matters of public business with the city departments or agencies, provided that no preferential treatment or consideration is requested by the elected city official or on behalf of the constituent. That's a mouthful.
And here we were just trying to provide more specific examples of public advocacy, right?
Yes. And again, that came from our comparative analysis.
Yeah.
We also, within the same section, removed that for the purposes of this provision, the mayor and council members are deemed to have worked because we moved it. So it's still within the code. It's in a broader area that's overarching. So should we need to point to it, it's available. We confirm that. So anyone have any concern with the addition of the new language?
No.
Okay. Appearances. We added city council because it just said any city board or commission, so we wanted to make sure that council was called out as well. Within the use of internet regarding a topic within the scope, so that it wasn't so broad that anything on the internet was subject to this, but it was specific to the scope of if somebody posts something on social media, for example, and it has to be within the scope of the official's board or commission, not generic.
And I put a comment there because after watching the meeting, I didn't feel like I had clear enough understanding as to whether or not you wanted to leave as internet or put in person or electronically.
Well, I kind of like both. I mean, like honestly, that because it's not necessarily just internet. I mean, it could be, I could have an appearance that could be in conflict.
Taking it at the newspaper.
Yeah. Very 1995. I do like the comment of adding the in-person or electronically. Does anybody? Okay.
So the statement that we've added regarding a topic within the scope of the officials board or commission. Since we are also including the city council, should it be the scope of the officials' responsibility? Or within the,
Cause it's not technically a board or a commission.
correct?
Within the scope of the official's purview? Is that too broad? Official, in the scope of the. Official, capacity or capacity role.
Elected or appointed role?
Is it tied to the officials' responsibility or the board they're standing in front of's responsibility?
What's the difference?
I would say the,
Just the
Or-
sentence structure.
Yeah.
There's a sentence structure as to whose scope we're saying is, we're saying in front of. I don't know,
But if I'm,
it's just a sentence structure
No, no.
question as to how you want it.
oh,
Do you want it to be within the board's scope? Or within that official scope, which is really the same thing, it's just sentence structure, how do you want it structured? Do you want it to say it's the board, the planning and zoning board, this is their scope? So you as a former member can't stand in front of them, or as a former member, your scope was this. You can't stand in front of them. It is just structure.
the board scope person.
board scope, but we're trying to broaden it to encompass council as well.
Oh, yeah, I'm just reacting to Meredith's language.
If you have the language that said for the purpose of this code, council has served on every board and commission.
Yeah, there you have it.
You added that to. So that 76.
Yes, the statement where we made.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
where they've
okay.
served in every capacity.
That's true, okay.
Is there something that occurs within council that doesn't occur within boards and commissions?
Oh, yeah.
But. If you only say boards and commissions,
Limiting, are we limiting?
regarding a topic within the scope of the officials.
I think the intent was the current appointed or elected role, not even thinking back about their previous role, but this is about their appearances when they're in office or in their appointed role.
Without. Okay, without rehashing the first complaint that came before you, I believe this was to clarify. You know, when you have that hat on, when you don't have that hat on, and when you have to tell people you have that hat on.
Correct.
And it's probably very confusing, but we cannot rehash the case you've already heard. And Angelique and I can't be in the room if you do talk about it. Because of conflict and it's over. I think that's what the intent was, and so if that is your intent, what's another way of saying? You know, you have to state. You know, I am a member of this board and I am not wearing this board hat when I'm writing a letter to the editor.
I'd like to remove the part. Where it said including the use of the internet in person or electronically. Because they hand out flyers or they put it in the newspaper or a magazine, they go. It's not a person, and then if we remove. No matter how you distribute that bit of information, you can't do that, so you have to do that. Like by saying to use the internet or in person or electronically. We leave an area where someone could go, I put it in a computer. That's not electronic, nor in person. So if we. Don't give examples, so just say this is what we do. What we don't do.
How about the internet and other forms of media? I mean, there aren't gonna be more and more ways that people are gonna communicate.
Other forms of communication.
Yeah, that don't necessarily,
But if we just put down 2 or 3, and there's 4th, 5th, 6th way that we don't cover, and they do it, then we gotta go, oh. Yep. You
Okay,
got
say any form of communication. And leave it at that.
Yeah.
So publicly distributed. Information in any form.
Sure.
What about the use of the internet? Around of the, or any form of media?
So if we say writing, and then you go, writing. Because here we say, publicly distributed writing. If I make a video, I don't write anything, then you can't catch me.
But saying,
I think it's narrowing it down too much.
Well,
distributed communication. So like, if you put it here, so what, just hypothetically, what if we put it? Anytime an official appears before the meeting of city council or any other board or commission, or when he or she writes a letter to the editor or other publicly distributed communications.
in any form. Cause that then eliminates having to say internet or media.
any form,
Any form, it could be a billboard.
It's not a new policy.
in any communication form or something, yeah.
Communication in any form, so you get rid of the writing forward. And then regarding a topic within the scope of the official's blank.
Capacity, yeah.
I have this one, and I'll read it. But we still need the
blank.
yes, so here, how it would read, I'm not gonna read the whole first part again. When he or she writes a letter to the editor or other publicly distributed communication in any form regarding a topic within the scope of the official's
Yes. Duty. Job.
Purview. I mean, that's short.
Election. Office.
office. Office.
Yes.
Office. I mean, maybe.
Office too, office?
Yes, okay, this is a no, right? No.
Responsibility.
Oh,
There was no kills for that, like that responsibility.
yeah. Within the scope of the official's responsibility.
I didn't get any more state. Coming that way.
Governing
Maybe next year.
responsibility, if we need to. Help clarify.
Elected or appointed responsibility.
It's longer than official responsibility.
No, that is official, no. That one I don't know for.
Within the scope of their official
Yes,
responsibility.
thank you. Yes.
There.
Speaking of there,
Are we gonna do his or her in the
Yeah.
chat, so there?
you know, I mean, most academic, you're not using he, she, it's
No, that's
singular
right.
singular they.
That would be
And you
throughout.
said, and when you said there, yeah, I mean, we really probably need.
I heard it too. I know.
And I noticed that, yeah, throughout, it should just be they, no he, her.
We can do a broad
Yes,
replace for that.
okay,
What-
right there. Then they're covered. Right there,
There, yeah, singular they.
capacity. Awesome.
So is there a reason? We specifically identified whether you live in there, I mean, that seems,
Very specific, right?
but I'm just.
Yeah, not the same thing too, why it would be so specific, that one specific example.
I've had this debate in my head already. And because it is very antiquated, it's not like a commonplace,
Right.
but it also provides clarity as to what you're speaking about
Yeah.
and the intent. So I weigh back and forth because I do agree, like, it's not really the modern means.
Right.
And it sounds antiquated, but at the same time, I read it in my head multiple times with it completely removed. And I totally got confused as to what the purpose of this was. And so I That was the thing, I don't know where we land, but I felt like it did serve some sort of a purpose as providing clarity, otherwise it started. I don't know. Open to both sides, it's like,
I mean, you say such as, but I don't, you don't, I know, it just keeps getting it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Do our officials write letters to the editor? Is it really that antiquated? Like, is this even relevant?
Op-ed is.
I mean, they're still,
Someone's writing them, yeah, they're still being written.
I can't remember the last one I saw, but.
It's more,
well,
it's more social media. I was gonna say, that's where you.
It's worded out.
okay. Let's take back what we have, drafted out, redline it. Let's also, Meredith and Anjali, or if we can kind of earmark 282 from a redline standpoint of where we kind of paused and drafted some additional language so that we've made it thus far. This is where we're at as far as the red lines. And then we can pick back up next time with the new drafted language and a whole new section. I feel like we're ready for conflict of interest. Open to.
Did you want to do your readings?
Well, I didn't know from a time perspective. I asked. So it's not really.
I'm getting text messages.
Yeah.
That's
Okay, I was like, oh, we could. I mean. Are there rules? Are we able to continue or that, so. It's up to you guys. I mean, what timing conflicts, it's 7:06. We can continue forward on the red lines. Or we can mark it. Down, there's actually, there's not many more. Oh, there's not many more red lines. So, there's only one more section, it looks like. Do we want to go ahead and continue?
Sure.
283?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. Sorry. Thought I was taking non-verbal cues over here, sorry. No, it's fine. Just trying to be considerate. 283, we reworded the entire section. It says an official or former official shall not use their position to access confidential information about any person or entity for any purpose other than the performance of official responsibilities. Disclosure to the public or personal use of confidential information gained by virtue of their current or former official position is a violation of this code. I don't think we've said is a violation of this code like yet. That was
Clearly.
I mean. Okay, so I know part of this is derived from. We had a discussion, but we wanted to make sure both use and disclosure was covered, like you're not supposed to use it, and that's why the disclosure comes. But would it accomplish the same goal if we said shall not use or disclose? Or somehow, I mean. I don't think anywhere else in the code do we say is a violation, you know, that's pretty strong language. I think. Shall not use their position to access.
An official or former official shall not use or disclose confidential information gained
Yes,
by virtue of the position for any purpose of the performance of professional responsibilities.
yes,
What do we like former official in there?
because things that are still ongoing, you're not supposed to. Take it or disclose it later. So certain things that are either discussed or accessed the confidentiality extends beyond when you're in office as an official. That was our last conversation, I just recall. And there were numerous examples of like contracts going in discussions for years and years and
Okay.
official turnover. And like even like health information, like ambulance information, things of that nature is protected for certain like statutory deadlines. And so you may not be in office anymore, but had access to it while you're in office, you can't disclose it even though you're no longer in office. Now you probably wouldn't have access anymore. You just, yeah.
So Meredith, the statement you read, is that meant to replace just that first sentence? Or what were you suggesting? What were you offering?
So in response to your chair's suggestion, delete the second sentence, revise the first sentence to read. An official or formal official shall not use or disclose confidential information gained by virtue of their position for any purpose other than the performance of official responsibilities.
So when we took this section previously. There's two different components. There's you shouldn't access things that you don't that are confidential, and you shouldn't use your role to access something that you don't automatically have access to because of whatever the topic is at hand, but then you should also not disclose it. And so I think that's how it ended up in the two sentences, that I think just combining them into one, as Meredith reframed it, probably accomplishes it and removes our really strong language at the end.
I like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I propose next meeting that we since we have accomplished going through the red lines as they are, we have the two changes from that review. So those will be accepted. We'll have them in still draft form. The others will be accepted figuratively. Not practicably. I open to suggestions on next sections. I feel like we've taken a lot of things that combine, we've looked at a lot of the model code things. I feel like we're ramping up toward where we can take the meteor conflict of interest potentially. But I'm very open to other section suggestions. And I cannot tell you what number it is.
Conflict of interest.
Thank you. It's not like you conduct training.
So we'll do conflict of interest next time. Okay.
So your next meeting would be in 3 weeks, would be June 12th.
I will be out of the country.
Me too.
I will be receiving some award that someone.
Oh, no. Meredith.
Yeah.
You wanna go for the 19th?
Yes. Is that a holiday for the city?
Juneteenth.
No, ma'am. But we do have 4B, 4 to 5.
We did have a better showing Wednesday, I want to observe. Like, than we've had the last couple of meetings. This is the day of the week, so we're.
So you're talking the 19th, you said?
So,
19th, okay.
and I guess the city is open on June 19th, Juneteenth. I'm asking.
That's
you.
right. No, that's okay.
We did pass the state legislative session and we are restricted on our holidays.
I mean, if that day, I'm open to that day, I'm also open to. If it would be a little bit longer, it'd be like, what, 5 weeks or so,
26th.
the 26th,
Sure, that's available.
is that available?
Mhm. Yeah, it is.
I will, 26th.
I'm good on the 26th.
Okay, 26.
Chris, does the 26th work for you?
I would prefer the 26th over the 19th for sure.
Perfect.
Six.
Okay, so the next meeting will be June 26th, same time,
Same station.
same best time.
I'll be out. Sorry.
You'll be out? I do think we have enough.
I think everybody else sort of like.
But Andrew said he'll be virtual, so, but we need to make sure we have quorum
In person.
in person. So I can attend, I could attend.
I can't.
I'm good.
Okay, so well, I just want to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success.
We need 4 in person.
Yes. Okay, June 26th, we'll look at conflict of interest, we'll look at the 2 modified red lines that we just went through. And does anybody else have any comments, thoughts, questions? Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
I second.
All in favor?
Hi.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.
See y'all.
Thank you. Thank you.